Good morning, everybody, joining us from different places around Australia and New Zealand. My name is Carly Hammond, and I work with the Responsible Investment Association Australasia. And I'm really pleased to welcome everyone here today to what's our final impact management and measurement community of practice event for 2021. So before we kick off today, I'm sure people are still slowly joining the webinar. First of all, I'd really like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm on here today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, out here in Melbourne's western suburbs. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. So today we're turning our attention to the different technological platforms out there that are emerging to help both companies as well as investors better manage their impact. I guess from my conversations, even some of the biggest investment managers and asset owners out there are still often relying on Excel spreadsheets to manage their impact data and record that. While at the same time, we are seeing some real developments happening with software, which makes that management as well as reporting, I guess, that much more straightforward. Doesn't make it easy, because it's not easy. We're not pretending that for a second, but it certainly can make things a lot more straightforward. So today I'm pleased to be welcoming three different providers in the space, each offering a somewhat different platform for business and investors. And I think it's really interesting to note that a number of these platforms have really emerged from the not-for-profit space and for-purpose space, where managing impact is just absolutely essential. Your funding relies on it, and just being able to do your job well relies on that. So, I see a lot of integrity behind these platforms, because they've come at it from understanding what impact really looks like. So today it's a fairly short and sweet. We've got 1 hour. The format's going to be three different presentations. And following each presentation, I'd really encourage everyone to pose any questions you may have. Feel free to type them in as we go. So when each presenter finishes, we can probe them with your different inquiries. We really want to make this as interactive as it can be, and practical for you to get the information you want about these different platforms. So yes, without further ado, I'd first up like to welcome Brad Gurrie, who is the CEO of Socialsuite. Socialsuite's actually based here in Melbourne too, with a presence on a couple of continents now. But I'm also really pleased to announce that Socialsuite has recently joined RIA as a member too. So welcome on board, Brad. Good to have you in the family. And I'll leave you to it.
Oh, thanks, Carly, and it's great to be a member of RIA. Before I kick off, I'd just like to begin to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land which we meet today, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I extend my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. Carly, thanks for the introduction, and a lot of what you said in regards to just connecting how we've started off in the not-for-profit sector and really working quite closely with a lot of those organisations, and then being able to extend it into other areas now, more recently working a lot with companies as well around impact measurement. So if we move to the first slide, so essentially there's 3 points I'd like to cover over the next 10 minutes. And the first part is really just talking about our point of view, which is really looking at the impact management is actually quite diverse and fragmented. And what I'd like to do is really define, I suppose, like our positioning around it and how we're actually overcoming some of the challenges that the sector actually faces. Then I'd like to move on to talk about an ESG solution that's really designed to work with small to mid-sized organisations, and And what we're doing is we're leveraging 7 years of learnings of working with nonprofits and being able to help accelerate the impact maturity for these organisations. And then finally, I'd like to close off with an opportunity to potentially collaborate on a matter that we're seeing increasingly, which is working with fund managers and investors that want to get visibility of small to mid-sized organisations' ESG reporting capabilities. So if we move on to the first slide, I think a really good starting point is looking at what is impact management, and from where we're looking at it from. And our definition really sits around impact management as the ongoing practice of measuring, assessing, and improving impact across sustainability and social-based issues. Now, we believe that all organisations should be measuring impact. And when we're looking at that, it's very much around that non-profit and philanthropic perspective. We're seeing that as a sector has been the absolute pioneers and the leaders. Increasingly, there's companies and there's also government and schools and universities that are really focused on measuring impact. Now, there's huge amounts of tailwinds in impact at the moment. We're seeing a really profound change as stakeholders are looking for a lot more transparency into disclosures and underlying impact-based data. And a lot of that's really being shifted from this capital. So we know from an ESG perspective that there's a shift from, that there's currently $30 trillion of assets under management. Over the next 5 years, shifting to $50 trillion. And a lot of legislative changes as well, where 26 countries around the world have legislated sustainability-based reporting. But fundamentally, and this is what is really important, is that the overarching reason that organisations should be measuring impact is the need to improve upon the impact. So understanding what that baseline is, and then understanding what are the drivers that organisations need to take to be able to improve that over time. So if we move to the next slide, I just really wanted to reiterate and go down a little bit deeper, which is that fundamentally, impact measurement is actually quite diverse and fragmented in a lot of ways. It goes by a lot of different names, whether it's sustainability-based reporting, social impact monitoring and evaluation, the list goes on. But what we know is that although it is fragmented, the underlying process and also the challenges of measuring impact are actually pretty much identical against those use types that I mentioned before, but also against those disciplines. And when you've got consistency and that the process is the same, it really allows technology to help automate and make it a lot easier for organisations to measure. And Carly, you mentioned at the start there, a lot of organisations are using spreadsheets to do this. And I think that is always a really great place for organisations to start, is using spreadsheet. But what will happen is that those organisations' requirements actually become more sophisticated, and technology, purpose-built technology, is the thing that really helps those organisations mature and move forward. If we move to the next slide. One of the things that across our 7 years of working in the nonprofit area is that we've actually seen a lot of really consistent changes of what companies are now facing today. And we've been able to leverage a lot of those learnings. So today, we're working with the likes of YMCA, Habitat for Humanity, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And these are all nonprofits and a number of large philanthropic organisations. And essentially, these organisations have embarked on a 3 to 5 year journey around impact maturity. And that's about a process of deep exploration with their own organisations to come up with their theory of change, their program logic, and then really go through this organisational change of where they needed to bring the company on their organisation on a journey to collect that data and then report upon it. And they're typically doing complex longitudinal beneficiary-based data collection around this to report upon their overall outcomes. And so we know that this is a long, expensive, detailed process for a lot of those nonprofits that have gone. So we've really tried to look at being able ways to apply these learnings to help the companies who are facing exactly the same changes today. So if we move on to the next slide. This is what we're hearing from companies as they embark on their ESG journey, is that a lot of these organisations are saying it's too hard, we're not ready, we don't have the resources, we can't afford consultants to get started. And this is actually a real challenge for a lot of companies these days, in the fact that we're seeing that 90% of the S&P 500 are doing sustainability reports. So it's a really strong penetration amongst that S&P 500, where they've invested hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars on consultants building out teams, bespoke technology to report upon this. But we know that only 50% of the small to mid-sized organizations are doing any type of sustainability-based reporting. And then within that, what's happening is that they're certainly finding it quite challenging as well, for the reasons that I mentioned above. So this is exactly the same landscape that we saw across our journey over 7 years with the nonprofits. So if we move to the next slide, this is why we've created a solution leveraging those learnings to really help overcome the challenges that organizations are facing when it comes to measuring ESG. And it's really about providing a really accessible starting point for those organizations and compressing that 3 to 5 year journey into something that's very accessible for those organizations, and they're getting immediate value out of being able to implement a system and a solution to measure their ESG reporting. So it's essentially about measuring ESG maturity, and organizations sign up, and effectively within 60 minutes that they're able to create their first baseline report. And then they go through a series of steps, which is making disclosures, their first baseline disclosure, and then leveraging a lot of the assets that we have to be able to help their maturity and being able to progress to become best-in-class ESG reporting and best-in-class organizations when it comes to ESG. So we launched several months back. We've got 50 publicly listed organizations at the moment on the ESG solution. We've got 23 of those organizations are also listed on the OTC, and we've just launched the solution into the US as well. If we move on to the next slide, when we're looking at the challenges that I'd mentioned before, was that we're really purposely led in the way that we designed the solution, is that we wanted to have technology that was very easy to be able to administer and report upon. And one of the big things that a lot of organizations faced, particularly at the small to mid-size, was that there's a lot of confusion about what is the framework that organizations needed to measure upon. And for the small to mid-sized organizations, we've really leveraged the World Economic Forum stakeholder capitalism ESG framework, thinking about it from the perspective that it can be widely adopted and easy for organizations to be able to implement. We've complemented the solution with a lot of coaching and also guidance templates, and then the ability for organizations to then to publish and put their ESG reporting out into the marketplace to tell their story to stakeholders, but also attract external investors as well. So this is very much designed for the small to mid-sized organizations and priced accordingly. We're seeing not only small to mid-cap companies adopt the solution. We've got venture-backed organizations from whether it's private equity or organizations that might potentially be on a path to an IPO. One of the smallest organizations that we've actually had come on board is just a team of 3 people as well. So I think that kind of speaks to being able to take a lot of that complexity out and a lot of the burden, that really about making it accessible for those organizations. If we move on to the next slide, this is a report that an organization, Provenance Resource, has included in their quarterly earnings, which is essentially that they're reporting, now that they're being really consistent about reporting upon their financial earnings, but then they're being able to complement that with their ESG disclosures as well. So we're making it really accessible. If we move on to the next slide, what we've got is an example of Cenotech, technology-based organization that hadn't previously reported upon ESG in their annual report, but they've leveraged the Socialsuite assets to be able to incorporate this in their annual report now. So again, really trying to make it accessible and compress that maturity for those organizations. If we move on to the next slide, and this is the final slide, I suppose this is an opportunity that we're really looking to explore as an organisation, which is, and this is really coming from the field where fund managers or investors are saying that the ASX 200 is typically well covered through being able to get ESG-based data from the likes of Sustainalytics and MSCI. But one of the challenges that's being faced is that the small to mid-sized organisations just don't have any underlying ESG-based data, and that the fund managers and investors are looking to try and get a portfolio view of the small to mid caps to be able to report and then have a visibility across their portfolio. So we're looking at being able to work with a number of different fund managers really to co-design and develop this as a potential solution to help the sector better understand the ESG disclosures for the small to mid-sized organisations. So just move to the final slide. I think that's the last slide. So I'm more than happy to take questions and hand back to Carly at this stage.
Thank you, Brad. That's great. It's really interesting to hear that. I hadn't heard that figure that 26 countries have now got legislated sustainability reporting. That's it's pretty clear where things are headed for the future. So I guess opening up to anyone really on the call, if anyone had any questions particularly, please feel free to, I think you can unmute yourself if I'm right, or raise your hand and let us know if you've got any questions. Just give people a second there. Everyone's a bit shy. There we have a raised hand. Sorry, I just saw the raised hand and now I've lost the raised hand. Marty McMillan. Can you unmute yourself, Marty? Are you able to do that? No, you're not able to. That's fine. Because it's a webinar. Sorry, I'm just getting across the different technology. Do you want to maybe type in your question into the chat function? And then, we can pose that to Brad. Is there anyone else who's interested to ask questions? Maybe what we might do is while you're typing that, there we go. Marty, I don't know if you can see that, Brad. So the question is your software integratable with in-house tech?
Yeah, so I really spoke about, I suppose, two main areas. That from a philanthropic and a non-profit, that longitudinal data collection, certainly we've got some ability to integrate. When we're looking at the ESG solution, is that it's very much designed for those small to mid-sized organisations that may not have that tech stack that's built out across an organisation. So at this stage, that we haven't made it. It's not integrating into other systems at the moment because it really is designed for organisations to get started. And then potentially as they mature, is that we build that out in our product roadmap.
Thanks, Brad. There's another question from Olivia too, where she wanted to ask which frameworks you're using for ESG disclosure.
Yeah. Thanks, Olivia. So we've, when we look at the market and the problem that we're looking to try and help companies solve, which was really about trying to select a framework that was broad and accessible for organizations to get started. And so we've got Tim on our team that's got deep expertise, and he scoured the market and looked at various frameworks and landed on the World Economic Forum's ESG framework. And essentially it's based on 21 core indicators. And that's the framework that we've looked at, of being able to make it the most accessible for organisations to get started, and really looking at trying to compress that maturity curve for organisations. So yeah, we've looked at the World Economic Forums, which is essentially they come out last year, and what it's been built out by the Big Four accounting firms, and essentially what they've done is they've gone across GRI and all the other frameworks and pulled out and consolidated that. So it's really an aggregation of various frameworks that are in market already.
Thank you. And Juja's asking a question around how time efficient are these tools, how much time they take to fill out the questionnaire, and is there any automation for generating quarterly reports?
When an organisation signs up, what will happen is that we'll schedule a onboarding call with one of our ESG coaching experts. And essentially what we'll do is we'll go through the 21 indicators. And at that point, what we're doing is we're working out which of those ones are material for the organisation, and then being able to set some timeframes about how they're going to progress and what stages that those organisations are at. And typically that onboarding call is a 60-minute onboarding call. And at the end of that, they'll have a report that's generated, which is able to have their ESG disclosures shared with various stakeholders. And I think it's important to note that that report is not necessarily about saying, hey, we're already best in class, but what it is, it's a commitment to a journey that these organizations are going on to become best in class. And what will happen is that from each quarter, we're working with those organizations, and they're leveraging our guidance templates to be able to progress and become best in class ESG. So a lot of IP built into the system to help those organizations build that out.
Thank you, Brad. There's one more question there from Jane, and I think then we'll move on to Unmesh and come back to questions at the end too. But the last question was, what does Socialsuite cost SMEs on average to implement within their business? I don't know whether you want to get into that, but that's a question from Jane from Pollination Foundation.
Yeah, Jane, obviously always happy to have conversations and work through specific needs. But I think that, what we see is that a lot of organizations are spending around about $10,000. And that's where those organizations are using professional services and also software licenses to get started. So not looking to be evasive, but it's just really that'll give you some indication of the price point that organizations are charging for impact-based software. But always happy to have a conversation, talk through specific needs.
Great. So a couple more questions there, but we'll come back to them at the end. I just want to give everyone some time. So I'm now pleased to introduce Unmesh, Sheth, who is the founder and CEO of SoPact. And you're joining us, I think, from West Coast of the USA. It's your afternoon, is that right, Unmesh?
That's right, from Silicon Valley, San Francisco area. So
great.
Welcome to you all. I have a very special connection to Australia. We started working with the Melbourne Business School and built the first actionable impact management book for the Jody York and Christopher. So many of you may know them. So it's a journey that is continuing. It's a very popular book that a lot of people are using around the world. So thank you, Carly, for giving an invitation, and really pleased to talk to you all. So to get started, who we are. So SoPact is a social enterprise focusing on helping to measure and manage the impact in the right way altogether. So in order to understand it, it's very important to look at the background. So as you all know, stakeholder-based impact management is the key to the long-term success of the people and planet and profit. And SoPact is one of the leader in impact measurement and management, and one of the trusting leading platform by many leading corporates, very large one, to impact investors altogether. So let's take where we are essentially. So many of you are looking through some of the headlines on a daily basis. Not a single day goes by from US business to essentially some of the Silicon Valley companies to many companies in Australia. There's a huge shift happening from shareholder-based economy to the stakeholder-based economy. And the reasons are very straightforward. There's a massive shift happening from climate change to social inequality to diversity and inclusion and all those things. And all of these things are forcing everyone from the businesses to impact investors to philanthropy to rethink their approach altogether. Not a single goes by, I don't really see it. I see new chief impact officer coming up every day in larger corporates altogether. Why is that? That's because everyone is really shifting towards stakeholder-driven approach altogether. Now, in order to shift into stakeholder-driven approach, impact evidence is the key. And in fact, you can argue that there's a large amount of impact investments, philanthropy included. But even the ESG and other corporate in the capital also is shifting on the right-hand side. But that shift cannot happen without impact evidence altogether. And SoPact removes the risk of not having the trustable impact evidence altogether. And the way we do is to essentially working through a continuous learning and improvement. It's one of the most ready and proven platform out there today that works you in a deep impact manner for anyone from corporates to foundations to the social enterprises and nonprofits. And why impact evidence? Impact evidence actually brings faster product market fit. It allows you to discontinue. We have a large corporates working with us. Before even they scale up the programs, they want to see if the stakeholder wants that program in first place. So why scale up and spend millions of dollars if stakeholder is not interested or really not seeing the benefit or outcome out of that? Evaluate each programs are better for return on investments. Now you can do faster and than ever before social return on investment. It's very, very important that you also have a good alignment, trustable alignment between funders and social purpose organizations. And ultimately, communicate the impact based on 5 dimensions of impact altogether. And so our approach is to work with the organization's long-term success. And that depends on continuous learning and impact evidence altogether. And the key to that success is not the long process, but short and frequent, what we call as the impact experiments. So the way we start, this is design the theory of change. We have a very powerful visual platform that allows you to build those things, choose from more than 4,000 metrics, and prioritize the outcome. This is the key thing. You can have a large TOC, but focusing on one outcome that is most important to the stakeholder is where we start. That's where our customer success will help you guide through the process. Identify the stakeholders, start impact experiments, identify all the key data sources, and based on that, continue to learn and keep repeating this process as many times as possible. So if you look at today's process, on the left-hand side, you will see that this is how most advisors do it. Essentially, they have a siloed approach of impact strategy design, data collection, reporting. All those things are very in a siloed manner altogether. Having everything in one place allows you to communicate the impact better, semantically understand the context better, and really communicate impact of evidence. Here's an example of out of many 35 plus asset manager and 100 plus enterprises, one of them is Abelobi. Abelobi is a South Africa-based social enterprise that's building resilient and sustainable small-scale fishing communities, contributing to multiple SDGs. And one of them is really focusing on they're improving the outcome and product market fit for mobile application they're building. And the way we help them building is we bring the data from multiple sources and give you unified understanding of the data, where the data is coming from Power BI, a data warehouse, data coming from their own mobile application and understanding the baseline, midline survey. Ultimate goal is to focus on their, help them understand where the real friction is and how can they start, fishermen can start using access to the marketplace and the individual users altogether, and ultimately giving better sources to the market altogether, removing all the middlemen from the picture altogether. Ultimately, that really helps them understand food security and burden. This is rather very more complex, but if you, in a nutshell, this is a key process, which is really impact experiment where we help understand different kind of outcome. Based on outcome, we understand all the data, and based on data, we semantically understand the data so that you can have impact evidence of the platform. With hundreds of integration, Impact Cloud is a complete platform with state-of-art Impact Cloud platform. And not only that, we believe that success is not just the technology. Success requires you to build the capacity, and that's why we have a very powerful online learning management tool with hundreds of videos. You can come to our website and see it, and resources that is available publicly and free. And this is how we work with impact investors. If you have working on due diligence, 2 times challenging financing for the customer solution process, you can design the process using your platform. Fund portfolio aggregation, you can do it in a platform. Building impact maturity, you can do that. If you want to do end-to-end investing, which is one of the most important use cases of the platform, you can do that. And I'll show the example of impact report altogether. So with that, let me do a very short and quick review of the Impact Cloud platform. Impact Cloud is a SaaS-based platform deployed throughout the world, but fundamentally designed to understand the process by first essentially defining the very visual process where you can start from Iris Plus based theory of change. So you can use out-of-box theory of change, or you can build your own portfolio strategy using visual process, define the right kind of metrics, define impact, outcome, activities altogether. As you do that, we have hundreds of and thousands of metrics on the platform, and start with that, choose the right metrics that's aligned to the right SDG or the standards, all you want, and align that with the sustainable development altogether. It's a very collaborative process. So basically, we have a clients who has 300 enterprises, and that essentially allows you to align each of them together and having a complete one particular dashboards altogether. Our approach is to provide very comprehensive ways of aggregating data from any sources, whether you are an offline data collection. So if you're working in developing countries, you use tools like Kobo Toolbox or Service CTO to aggregate the results. Or if you're looking to collect data from WhatsApp, you can do that. Ultimately, you have a singular place to understand your impact based on a semantic and qualitative understanding of the impact. And one of the most popular projects in the space is called Impact Management Project. So using that approach, you are able to reduce your risk of your project by understanding based on 5 dimensions of impact. Who? That's how essentially you understand. Are you serving the right communities? This is the example of the affordable housing. And by essentially looking at the right kind of thing, you are reducing the risk of gentrification process, for example. Or what is the outcome? And you can see how different projects are going throughout the different locations. How much contribution and risk. So essentially, it's a very powerful way of communicating the impact based on the 5 dimensions of impact, which is really what the power of the platform is essentially. Whether you are looking to aggregate data from and benchmark the results from multiple sources, you have a platform that allows you to measure and manage the platform altogether. So these are some of the examples. Again, lots of resources on the websites. Come and visit us. And when you are ready for starting impact measurement management journey, talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Unmesh. It's fantastic to always see the platform in motion too, where the rubber hits the road, and And also, yeah, fantastic to see that integration with IMP as well. So, look, we have got a couple of questions for you. I think the first one's a bit kind of more holistic, just to your point around having someone in the role of Chief Impact Officer. Kevin's asking, given that most organisations or many organisations don't have that resourcing for that kind of specialist, where do you think this function should sit within a company and why? That's his first question.
It's a great question, by the way, and we come across all the time. So one thing we have learned is though we have one of the best platform, the platform itself is not sufficient altogether. And in fact, that's why if you saw the picture, it requires a lot of integral engagement of understanding the advisory on designing the right process altogether. So we want to make sure that we really provide the right kind of advisory functions that is fully integrated into the entire journey of the impact management journey of the enterprise altogether. So we've provided the couple of multiple approach we provide. One is called train the trainer model. Other one is complete managed services, where we could be outsourced chief impact officer team. In certain rare cases, we also train the companies on their own training as well. But most of the time, what we have seen is that impact measurement management is still relatively new. And so that skill set is rather new, and that's why they really engage directly with us.
Thank you. I've got a question from Andrew at Unity Housing. So he's interested in, for SoPact, your presence here in Australia in terms of whether you're working with any organisations, whether you're working, and then in Australia, but then also more broadly, whether you're working with any not-for-profit housing organisations more broadly internationally.
Yeah, so we are working with a very large super fund in Australia. I'm not allowed to give the name yet, though. And one of the out of so many funds, one of the fund is focusing on a place-based investing. I'll be happy to talk about it. We're also working with other Australian-based philanthropy organizations as well. So we have a very deep expertise in affordable housing.
Great. I don't think I have any more questions right now. I've got a couple that we'll save till the end to ask everyone else. So what I might do now is hand over the mic to Darshita Gilles, founder and CEO of Maanch. So Darshita and her colleague here, Baxi, who's a product lead, they're both joining us from the UK, so it's getting late over there, I think. So thank you both for joining this webinar.
Super, thank you. You're already in tomorrow. We're still in the past. It's still midnight here on the 29th of November. Pleasure to meet you all, and thank you for this opportunity. Before we talk about our solution, I just want to share a huge appreciation to Brad and Unmesh for the work that they have done. I think impact is a very challenging space, and especially the three of us organizations started earlier on this journey. So I completely empathize with the journey this has been to even get to here. I think we are also seeing positive uptake on impact and ESG globally, not just in our countries. So I think this is a great sign of the world, and especially the investment world, recognizing that impact is not just something that nonprofits deliver. Companies that investors have invested in also deliver. And I think ESG, in how I see it, ESG is just the first step in the journey towards impact. I don't think ESG is a proxy for impact, but it definitely helps companies start to think about other stakeholders that are part of their cycle. Maanch means platform in Hindi. I started Maanch 3 years ago with the primary vision to automate how impact data is captured, how it's analyzed, and how it's reported on. And impact is something that we all share globally. I know we live in different countries, but when it comes to climate change, it's a global challenge. And for solving global challenge that has multiple stakeholders that are involved, we require solutions that can deliver outputs to multiple stakeholders. So at Maanch, we have solutions for the nonprofit sector, for corporates, as well as for investors. Today, we are particularly interested in sharing our Invest solution, which my colleague here will share with you about. But before we sort of go into the product, just to highlight that we don't anticipate that all investors will necessarily just divest from their existing portfolios. What's important is that they can drive engagement and they can drive impact through engaging with their portfolio companies. And what we have built is a solution that allows investors to track the current ESG and impact status of their existing portfolio and be able to track every action and every interaction they've had with their portfolio companies, and then therefore what impact they have had overall on a portfolio basis. From here, I'll pass on to my colleague here to share a little bit more insight into the actual product. At the end, if we have time, I'm happy to share also about how this interfaces with our company solution. Over to you here.
Thank you, Darshi, and thank you to everyone at RIA for having us. Essentially, what Darshi mentioned, the problem we're trying to tackle is impact data management. And so what we've realized is that engagement data is, of course, very important, but it's complex and it's multiplying. And as you guys had mentioned, Brad and Unmesh, both of you, that a lot of investors are relying on manual methods such as Excel sheets. And so the way we see it, effective data management requires 3 key components: data capture, data analytics, and data reporting. So the Maanch engagement tracker allows users to be able to automate this process. And so they're able to track, record, and report on all of their engagements, and making this entire process increasingly time and cost efficient. So we can take the example of ExxonMobil and Engine One from earlier this year. Engine One, a small activist hedge fund with about a 0.2 stake in one of the largest oil and gas companies, managed to elect 3 people to the board within within a year. And all of this was through active engagement. If we could skip to the next slide, please. And so what we've seen is that with Engine One raising this issue to highlighting the composition of Exxon's board, they cited that their board members lacked experience in 4 key areas. As part of this, they mentioned that some of the board members lacked experience with alternative energy, with the regulatory environment, and the technological environment. And by raising this issue, Engine One started a long series of interactions with Exxon. Over the course of just about 6 months, we estimate that Engine One initiated over 65 interactions with the board. This varied from everything like letters to emails to other asset managers, public meetings, and multiple phone calls with the CEO and other senior members of the company. All of these interactions over the course of months culminated in a board vote that successfully elected 3 out of 4 of the nominations that Engine One had proposed to the Exxon board. So just by looking at this one case, a very public one, we can see that shifting the needle on ESG issues requires votes and many, many interactions. And as such, mandates a significant amount of time and energy dedicated to data management. So we can see from this one engagement instance that the large amounts of data that are involved in this entire process, we feel that with asset managers and other institutional investors, there's a larger number of issues, and as such, a pouring of similar interaction data. So this large amount of data would really benefit from a system to track and record and analyze the impact of every engagement. And that's how we see the engagement tracker fitting into this space. Next slide, please. So at its core, the Maanch engagement tracker is the first product dedicated to efficient data capture, in addition to ESG analytics and reporting. So the engagement tracker allows investors to input any issue raised with a portfolio company, and then subsequently any interactions and board votes. And all of this can be done in minutes. So all of our inputs are standardized from the beginning using our standardized systematic forms and allow for real-time severity updates for its users. This means that users can be updated when issues remain unsolved for large periods of time, or when a portfolio company is constantly flagged as unwilling to change. All of these inputs allow for easy collaboration across geographies and different investment teams. And our platform allows for the ease of integration with other apps such as Outlook and Google Suites. All of this data on the platform is seamlessly linked. So every interaction and vote is linked directly to a thematic and reactive issue. And then so with this, you're able to produce a digital data trail to explain and evaluate every engagement and investment decision that you have. Next slide, please. So in addition to this intuitive capture, the engagement tracker allows investors to generate real-time data analytics and produce reports. So data on the platform is aggregated at an organizational level, allowing you to see top-level engagement insights for your investment firm. In addition to that, the platform also allows for fund and company-specific reports. So this includes things like the number of issues raised in a year, responses that you've noted from companies, as well as issues and interactions categorized by sector, region, and ESG focus. The platform in general is designed so that investors are able to easily export raw data, as well as PDFs. These PDFs are catered to a variety of stakeholders, including clients, asset owners, and regulators, and feature more digestible visualizations for the smaller scale investors who don't have the resources to be able to produce their own. The entire platform, from capture to reporting, is aligned to a variety of global ESG frameworks. This includes the GRI taxonomy, as well as the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so this platform allows you to report against up-to-date ESG mandates and understand the impact of every engagement. Next slide, please. So that's where the engagement tracker fits into the space. We've created it for investors, asset managers, and anyone else in the ecosystem. We have now beta tested the platform with 28 listed equity funds with just over 137 billion assets under management. Our solution has 4 key features: efficient data capture, digestible data visualizations, a collaborative interface, and an easy-to-use system. With this, we estimate that our platform has the ability to deliver operational efficiencies to investment professionals and bring savings of up to 20% of reporting cost. In particular, the engagement tracker is most useful to fund managers, analysts, and any ESG teams that are out there as well. Most ESG solutions in the space we found focus on analytics and reporting, which is a very time-intensive and important focus, but none have focused on the investor process of engagement itself. And so our solution really stands out in 2 ways. The first is that it captures structured data at the source of an engagement event. And the second is that it delivers a digital data trail, which is essential to demonstrating any actions towards responsible investment. So with our first market engagement tracker, we want to empower the sector globally to accelerate impact where it matters the most. Next slide, please. And we are very happy to do this with our strong team, which we have a background across finance, philanthropy, and tech, and have worked together to develop solutions within the philanthropy and corporate ecosystem as well. Thank you.
Thank you both here and Darshita. Really interesting for me. I haven't learnt too much about Maanch, and I just think so timely when we're just seeing really kind of engagement coming of age, and it really can't come of age unless you've got this kind of backbone to the recording of engagement. So thank you so much to everyone. So we've just got another question from Andrew to Darshita and here around whether you have any presence yet in Australia in the not-for-profit sector. First question for you, Darshita, in here.
Sure. So we have in the nonprofit sector, we have solutions for investors and for nonprofits to track and manage their impact. We don't have any foundations yet that we work with in Australia or Asia yet. And we do have a few charities that are registered with the Maanch platform that are from Australia and Asia.
Thank you. I've got a question here from David, which is probably one for everyone, really. His comment is that these systems seem additional to the existing processes for the collection and presentation of information, some of which has to be kept in their existing locations for privacy or security. So to understand the value add, he would like to see the real world experience from a customer's perspective, needing to go from the hypothetical and generic to specific applications in practice, including ideal use cases, as well as honesty around the areas where the systems cannot add value. I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that. Go for it.
Thank you. I'll just share a screen. It's just a one slide shot of a real case study we've worked with. So this is not the investor solution that he presented. This is our corporate solution. And this is just an insight into a journey of a company that we have worked with, a bit similar to the kind of clients that Brad and Unmesh mentioned. So they are not a listed company. They are a growing mid-cap company. They have about 100 million in revenue, 300 employees. And we started working on their ESG and impact journey. And this was very much a nudge from their investors. The way we work with our clients is we say, let's not start with getting everything right and being perfect. Doing a little bit better every day is more important than coming out with a perfect ESG score. So the way we work with our clients is we break down the journey into 3 parts. We do a diagnostic, so it benchmarks them in terms of where they are as an organization. And second is where we give them a strategy and they execute the strategy so they see their points going up. And the third is where they move into automation. So we don't actually automate the journey for corporates until they are sufficiently mature. And when we start with them on their ESG journey, we try and identify 2 or 3 key KPIs that they can work with that's going to help them show their investors that their business is taking care of their non-financial risks. And the outcome of that is generally linked to a business benefit. So in the instance of this company, there is an increased amount of sustainability linked loans or finance that's available out there. And the way we help this organization to navigate the ESG or impact journey is actually to get access to capital to drive some of these high impact projects. And so with this particular company, which is an infrastructure space, diversity is a big challenge, not just in the organization sector at large. And then obviously with large amount of data centers consuming a lot of energy and generating greenhouse gases, these were the 2 most important KPIs that we help them embed these KPIs in their organization. And just one final point, I saw a question before about the role of impact officer. Whilst there is a need in large organizations to have an anchor role, when we work with organizations, we generally don't recommend having one person. We recommend reworking everyone's job descriptions to include a line about how they will drive impact in the work that they do. And in that way, organization is much more vibrant and alive when it comes to impact management overall. Thank you.
That's a great point. Just running out of time, so just a couple more questions for Maanch. Whether there is a report generated between the engagement tracker and the outcomes that are being achieved or not achieved. And then the second question is, Are any of the engagement service providers using your tool?
So just to the point about the engagement service providers, we've actually had a couple of conversations with engagement service providers that are based in the UK over here. And so we haven't onboarded anyone as of yet, but we are looking to adapt the tool so that service providers can integrate for large scale companies as well. And then, sorry, I've forgotten the first question.
Is there a report that's generated?
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you. So on the reporting side, there are reports where you can establish your own targets and see how your engagements are measuring up to these. So we are trying to keep the platform as customizable as possible because we're aware that by location and by sector, there are very different ESG KPIs that you may have internally that you have decided on as investors. And so what we're trying to do is ensure that you meet those targets that you've set yourself. And so you're able to integrate those into the platform.
One final question from Kirsten. How do you think Maanch will adapt to the Australian investment landscape where shareholder resolutions are lodged differently to other jurisdictions such as the US?
So, sorry, Darshita,
yeah.
do you want to go ahead?
Carry on here. Yeah, go for it.
No, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say that we are currently working with investors in the UK and then also in Europe. We have actually been speaking to someone who was previously working in Australia. So we're trying to get a better understanding of what that ecosystem looks like in general. But on the whole, what we're trying to ensure that as our platform is as customizable as possible, so that regardless of the way that you collect and analyze data, that it works across regions.
Great. So we're running out of time. Just wanted to ask everyone just for a very quick take. Kevin's just asked if we want to change the status quo, then we need to move beyond impact reporting into better impact management. And so from the tool that you've presented, can you we're really running out of time, so I only want less than a minute on this, around how you've seen organisations use your platforms to start to drive change and to use the data to make a difference. I think that would be great.
I'm happy to go first on that. And Kevin, a really great example is an organisation on our social impact side, Top Blokes, that deliver mentoring programs to youth. Essentially, what they've done is that they've used the platform to take an evidence-based approach to what they're doing in terms of delivering mentoring-based programs. And essentially, with that, they've been very strong around their anecdotal stories, but now having evidence-based approaches, that they've actually been able to take that evidence and get their program into more schools, which means that as they're getting into more schools, they're actually having more impact, they're becoming more financially sustainable. They've also been able to use that approach to being able to get more grants as well. And ultimately, as they're able to do that, they're able to clearly deliver more impact. So I think that's a really strong practical example of when an organisation is able to set up their systems, collect that data, and then being able to not only measure their impact, but also be able to, to share that with various stakeholders.
Thanks, Brad.
And this is something, the topic that I can talk for hours, basically, but this is one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of the ESG the way it's done today. Fundamentally, it's not about impact reporting at all. It's about continuous learning and improvement. If you are not focused on and continuously learning and improving the stakeholders' journey, you're not doing impact management process, period.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Okay, well, we're pretty much out of time. So thank you everyone for joining in, and thank you to our panelists from joining us from all different parts of the world. Look, I think it goes without saying that if anyone's interested in seeing more of these different platforms, having a walkthrough and talking, I'm sure Unmesh, Brad, Darshita and here would love to hear from you. So please, their websites have all their information, but if you need us, Ria, we can also help connect you to as well. So thank you, everyone. It's our last event for 2021, but also would love to hear from anyone if there's any themes that you're keen to dive more deeply into with regards to impact management in 2022. Please reach out to me. Keen to make this forum be what you all need as well. So yeah, without further ado, thank you to all our panelists today, and thanks to everyone for joining us. I hope you have a good sleep or a good day ahead, whatever's coming next.